Reports of a scorpion nest nearby. Sounds dangerous.
Oh my god, I opened the menu and I have to press escape 20 times to get- Let me out of the menu, I'm dying! Help! Help! Get me out of the menu! I can't. I'm dead. I finally... Oh, I'm not dead, I'm just froze. With the first weekend of Anthem's VIP demo done, I wanted to share more thoughts on the game while I share this footage of the game. It's running at total maximum settings besides motion blur. Motion blur is disabled. The game was at 1080p, but I'll render this video out at 4K just for less bitrate artifacts, so please watch at 4K for the best viewing experience. I'm a big Mass Effect fan and miss those games, but I don't want to see Anthem do poor. I feel BioWare writing is really present here. While I'm not sure on the story itself since that remains to be seen, Anthem's dialogue is written like you would expect it to be. I love Ray Chase's performance as the main dude character. He's really recognizable, but he's such a good actor. I hope there will be moments in Anthem that exercise his ability to seriously emote though. Unfortunately, that's all I gotta say about the game's narrative. Now, I want to avoid issues that I don't think will be around for a few months of launch. However, I have a few to address. For example, the server issues. I had 3 friends who actually couldn't start the first mission this weekend, and I don't know if they'll be trying out the game this coming weekend. It sucks, but it's not like that issue should be around at launch. Another one of the issues being how the audio of the game starts insanely loud and doesn't load your set audio volume until a certain part of the first loading screen. I then try turning the game down through Audio Mixer, but it actually resets its mixer volume every time you start the game, and with the constant freezing issue that was happening pretty often, but I digress. These complaints won't be the meat and potatoes of this video, so let's get into that. Some of my complaints may seem nitpicky, but when I think about how some of these issues transferred over from Mass Effect Andromeda to this game, I seriously think they have to be addressed by someone. I want to focus more on the core gameplay, so for example, I'm going to speak from the perspective of playing with a controller. Aiming and shooting and moving all feel really tight and polished. Flying feels good too, but I loathe the overheating mechanic. I don't feel the open world accommodates it. I love how overheating is used in, say, boss fights where they can overheat you. It reminds me of MechWarrior. It's cool that it's also the amount of time you can hover for, and I like the details like hovering over water lets you hover forever as it freezes the overheat meter. Same with flying close to water. As I said earlier also, I was speaking from a controller standpoint. While I am playing on a PC and prefer mouse and keyboard for my shooters, Anthem's really rough on PC from this demo. Controls are one reason for this. The first thing is mouse acceleration. It needs to be turned off, but you can't turn it off. Mouse acceleration ruins aiming so much. I'm worried about it a lot in Anthem because in Mass Effect Andromeda, you could disable it in a setting, but it didn't actually get rid of the mouse acceleration. When I researched why this was happening, I had found that apparently Frostbite, the engine those games are in, has built-in mouse acceleration that you can't disable at all. If they could respond to feedback and truly give you one-to-one mouse controls, I would love it. Flying on mouse and keyboard is also atrocious. I'm not sure exactly what I would do to fix it, but the idea of how far I have to make my mouse travel to go from up to down isn't good. I wish the reticle stayed in the middle when you weren't moving the mouse. Those are my biggest complaints with the controls on PC, but another one worth mentioning is navigating the menus. This was a massive issue in Andromeda. When you move your cursor over a button, it's like being on the button isn't actually enough to select the button. You have to make sure your cursor is in the dead center of the button for it to actually select it. When you're quickly moving your cursor, it almost feels like the menus can't keep up with how fast you're moving your cursor. I heard that you could play through Anthem alone if you wanted to, and I don't actually see that being possible, or at least fun. Enemies can be aggressive, they will flank you, and there are attacks that certain enemies don't even need to see you, but instead, they put a marker on top of you and that marker blows up. Doesn't matter where you are, that can just happen. I think that's a pretty cool mechanic actually, but dealing with that alone sucks. Along with how much health enemies have, the game seriously feels designed around 4 players. If things stay like they are, I imagine trying to play solo would be really frustrating as you have to single-handedly deal with boss mechanics and constantly dealing damage. I think an effort is present though in some aspects to get around just blindly shooting enemies. Don't get me wrong, I still think enemies are bullet sponges, but they have some variety to what they do. There are bosses with phases, there are objectives that aren't kill everyone in an area. When I played with random people in one open area event thing, the objective was to collect these orbs and bring them to a location. Nobody else doing the event got that, so I was doing all the progress until the orbs stopped spawning for me. So then I was figuring, okay, they don't want one person to solo the event, that's fine. However, nobody ever figured out the objective. And I think that has to do with my biggest complaint in the game, and that's visual information. Yes, it literally says what to do at the top right, but players can be dumb, and you gotta do your best to help the oblivious. Maybe, like, spell out the objective across the screen as it changes? But listen, while Anthem is leaps and bounds in improvement over Andromeda's UI and menus, I still found it really confusing to navigate. Sometimes it just feels like key information was missing for me. The radar system at the top is definitely not something I like. I like its form, but its function is just less information than the typical game with a compass minimap combo. Let me say this as I'm looking back at my footage. I noticed every time someone had joined, as the notification for that stuck out enough while I was looking at the middle of the screen, but the status info that shows up on the left side, which is arguably more important, like when you are being cooled and it says you're cooled or on fire, I never noticed that once while playing. I also lost the icon showing where teammates were around the edges of the screen. I wish those were bigger. On the flip side, when there is dropped loot, the icon showing it is actually bigger depending on your distance, and I love this touch. I wish health and shield stuck out more. Here's my big quip with them. I think the meters just need to be bigger, or maybe not on the opposite side of all the other information I'm trying to look at. The last thing I want more of though is the effect filters, like the screen getting red at corners and black and white when low on health. This game has far too much visual information because of how fast it is, and it's faster than most other typical shooters or games like this. The only game I could really compare its speed to is Warframe. So anyways, I found myself constantly just not able to see what I'm doing or what is going on because there is too much going on. And when the filter takes away color information with black and white or limits your vision with darkening red edges, it's too obstructing. There's also so many effects in the game that have some sort of overlay or screen warping, and the game is just too fast for all of these effects. I think either the screen effects need to be toned down or the game needs to be slowed down, and I know we don't want to slow the game down. My favorite part of the UI is the symbols and icons used in the middle and their animations. The rotating for reloading, the animated hit blips in the middle, and that animated bit when you land a killing shot is sick, as is the pixelated effect of the red edges that show when you are being shot from. So now, when in the Forge, I wish you could use the D-pad in the first menu so bad, but you have to move a cursor with the analog stick, and it just feels unnecessary. I also found it annoying trying to figure out how to change the color of armor. I was looking for a hotkey at the bottom because nothing on the UI indicates you can move the cursor to the right to select the color. There is an arrow there, but I misinterpreted that arrow as just pointing to like the material or like the area selected or whatever. Not that I can move my selection to the right to the color, because it's pointing, the arrow is pointing right at the name. And then the cursor, when you go down, goes back to the material instead of the color underneath the one you had just selected. And my last thing to talk about is performance. You may have noticed I mentioned the ultra settings in 4K at the beginning, but as you can see, my frame rate in the top right is almost never 60 FPS. The game's optimization isn't that good, and you may wonder, if I'm barely getting 60, then why don't I set the game settings to low? That's because it makes zero difference on my hardware. Frame rate was exactly the same at low settings, so I just didn't bother lowering everything. Now you may also have noticed in the beginning I mentioned I had motion blur turned off, and yet it's still present. Turns out, motion blur is built into the post-processing preset, so to disable motion blur I'd have to set the post-processing down a couple options. So, those are my thoughts on Anthem so far. I miss Mass Effect, but I don't want to see Anthem bomb at all. However, I do want to see how much work they can put into improving it. Given the transparency present in their published words on the VIP demo issues, it instills a bit of confidence in me, and I feel BioWare is genuinely looking for feedback. I'd love to hear more thoughts, of course, as well, so feel free to comment if you got to play the VIP demo, and otherwise, if I ultimately end up getting the game, I might try to put out some kind of review for it. So till next time, thanks for watching.